Kia ora and welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod once again. The Chiefs, they're looking hot. Their hottest winning streak ever to start a season, and we've got lots to talk about with them and the Blues, and how the Blues, well, they possibly threw that one away. And again, because they'd done it the week before as well. We'll talk a bit about Beauden Barrett. We'll talk about this Wallabies squad that's just come out as well. So there's plenty to talk about. A bit of Damian McKenzie, touch on Brad Webber's philanthropic endeavours as well, and all of the other games throughout Super Rugby Pacific. Welcoming in, as ever, James Parsons.
G'day, me old mate.
How are you feeling?
Well, I think you're right. It was similar to the Crusaders, wasn't it? I know we'll get in more detail, but the game was there. It just wasn't taken, unfortunately.
Just sucked the energy out of the room. Just like that. And over in Japan, Bryn Hall comes to us with a huge smile on his face. Because we know that Jipper wanted to pick that. He saw it coming, actually, didn't he?
He did, but to his credit, I would have done the exact same way. I would have done the exact same thing if it was the Crusaders on the other foot. So now feel for you, me, old mate, but we'll go into that detail right now. But firstly, I just want to congratulate my old man. It's his birthday today. So, Dad, happy birthday from all the way from Japan.
Very good. You've sent him a present?
No, I'll leave that to my brother and my mother, fortunately. A phone call was good enough for me. So, and obviously,
absolute. Oh, you're senior old man in prison. My God.
Oh, well.
Shout out is not going to cut it.
Yeah. Even if it's on national television. Yeah. Even if it's to, the hundreds of thousands of people around the world that watch this program on a weekly basis.
You got and still can't shout him a bloody present. My God.
Oh, well, present enough for the Chiefs was getting it one over the Blues. Obviously, it was a difficult game for the Blues, considering the fact that they could have well and truly had that in the bag. As a captain, as a former Blues captain, the shots at goal thing, Taylor mentioned it in the commentary, they had their chances to accumulate, and they chose to accumulate, and they chose not to accumulate. It was just a little bit mixed there, and I think Dalton admitted that after the game.
Yeah, it's a hard one because there would have been discussions throughout the game. It's not just on Dalton, there would have been other leaders, in terms of even maybe the kickers weren't feeling it, conditions were pretty rough. I'm not sure, but I think the best example, or a team that gets it right, 9 times out of 10 is Ireland. And they've got a theory, pretty much for the first half, they are going to the corner and they're going to run the tank dry, and then they may accumulate in that second half to put sides away, or they just keep going if they're feeling it. And I think, I was probably, as a captain when I played, I was more of an accumulator, but the game's changed now, and I think if you don't try and go in sevens, you leave yourself short, more often than not. But in the tight conditions, wet conditions, maybe there was opportunities to take some scoreboard pressure. But there was a couple of times when I think we took the 3 that I was, on the couch thinking maybe I'll, go for the corner and keep the pressure on as well, because they had shown some, especially the Blues had shown some success early, with Retallick's try. So it's always a hard one. It's always easier once the game's over to think that, because if they'd scored, everyone would have been congratulating them. So.
Bryn, it wasn't like the Blues having trouble getting down into the Chiefs' 22.
No, it wasn't. Look, I think, probably unfortunate that just the turnovers and not being able to score those points were in that area. I think, look, they had 31 possessions start inside the 22 to the Chiefs 13, so they had ample opportunities to be able to try and score points in that scenario. But I think, unfortunately, you look at last year for the Blues, with their winning streak that they had, they were winning games like that and being able to execute in crucial moments. And, it's a funny thing, a year later, they could have had a couple of games where they probably should have won just due to, I guess, the total turnovers. They had 15, which isn't very good, and probably led into the reason of why they weren't able to score points. So I think we said a couple of weeks ago, they had their chances to win it, but unfortunately, they weren't able to get it done. But in saying that, you've got to credit the Chiefs defense, operating at 91%. They made double more the tackles than the Blues, and I guess Clayton McMillan talked about it a lot around their resilience and being able to show a lot of fight in there and the defensive efforts, because I think, I look at my time with the Crusaders and being successful, Jip has talked around it as well. Defense wins championship, and when you can win like that, they've showed a lot of ways to be able to win in this competition. Out in front early, being able to grind wins, not play well, and still get the job done. So it just shows where they are at their moment, and they're building a lot of belief in Hamilton for sure.
What was the policy while you were at the Crusaders with accumulation versus going to the corner? I know Kieran Reid was a big fan of going to the corner.
I think it's just a feel thing. I think sometimes, people when watching don't get a real good feel of what the conditions are like or the kind of feeling and the momentum of how games are going. So, I look at probably Sam was my captain and when I was there, he was massive around being able to build pressure with 7 points and being able to really put teams under the pressure, under the pressure valve, because even if you don't score, but you're able to build pressure within 5 minutes of being down in that half, it catches up at the back end of the game and being able to score points when they're tied. But then saying that, it's having a good balance around, you might not have had a lot of momentum for 10 minutes and 3 points might actually be good to get away with having those points and just being able to accumulate points that way. So there are a lot of different ways to do it. But again, hindsight's a great thing. And, I think if the Blues were able to score points, they had a lot of opportunities to be able to get the job done. But unfortunately, the execution just wasn't on the weekend.
I think that's the key is I don't think not taking the penalties is the reason they lost that game. Similar to that Crusaders game, they had 10 entries into the 22 and only came away with 13 points for the game, whereas the Chiefs have this knack of, when they get an opportunity, they are taking points every time. And I mean, they did it in the first 30 seconds. But that ruthless execution to take the points when they're off is probably what's separating Chiefs and the rest of the comp, to be honest, and their defensive efforts. Because they were made to make a lot of tackles, but I think and I know Leon is massive on when you get in that red zone. I think I even said it last week. You want to be getting eight times out of 10 you're coming away with points, and it's more often the other way at the moment. I think the one thing they can be positive about the Blues is they are putting themselves in position to win games. It's just that last sort of execution part, and that'll come. I think Leon sort of spoke about after the game is maybe that they get down there and try a little bit too hard because they can probably sense that pressure themselves that they haven't been as clinical as last season. But I think it's not all doom and gloom for the Blues, and when these passes start sticking, they'll be able to put sides away because statistically they're putting themselves in position the most in the competition. To come away with points.
I suppose the big worry is that it's the big name players who are the ones who are not finishing a lot of the time. The people who you pay to be the people who deliver under pressure.
There's some people out there that loves to go watch a few battlers too, mate.
Yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yes and no. I just don't think you can ever single out. I think there's one glaringly obvious one, obviously. That you can say that, obviously you can put the ball down before you're going out. But other than that, I don't think it's individuals that do it, like 10 times in a row, or we've seen one individual, like I can think, obviously Tucker against the Crusaders, Hoskins to Tutu, but you haven't heard those players' names again in coming weeks. So yes, but the thing is with winning a Super Rugby competition, there's a lot of big names, in the teams that are at the top. Or the pointy end. So I think you could sort of statistics will show it's more often than not will be a big name because of the squads they've got. Yeah,
that Beauden Barrett is what we're referring to. The unfortunate Beauden Barrett put down, which he put his foot in goal. We've seen, I think, from Christian Cullen back in the day, we saw it once where he just dropped the ball out of nowhere. I think we've seen Bryn pull off something just as spectacular. Karl Dobby sent us an email, and his question in the email was regarding Beauden Barrett. He's playing himself out of the World Cup, according to Karl Dobby, by exposing his flaws week in, week out. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think he would probably say himself that he's not in vintage form, but 114 tests, so I think he's going to have to do a lot more wrong to play himself out of a World Cup squad. We know how good he is, but I think that competition's good. Like Damian McKenzie is staking his claim. Like everyone was sort of talking, is it Stephen Perifeta or Damian McKenzie in that sort of 10-15 role? Well, the way he's playing, he'd be talking opportunities to be wearing the 10 in the All Blacks. So I know Brodie will come right, but he will. The amount of work he puts in during the week, the hard work will pay off eventually. And I always think it's always hard on individuals. There were, some individual errors, but it is a team sport, and you have to have a high-functioning set piece. You have to have a high-functioning breakdown. It is always going to be a challenge against teams like the Chiefs.
And the Blues did have high-functioning in the most part, which would suggest that Beauden Barrett did most of the things right outside of a couple of glaring mistakes.
Yeah, 100%. And there were obviously other players around that made mistakes, but people only, because Beauden is Beauden, people see and remember that. And whereas other players aren't as big names that potentially had higher error rates if you go through the team statistically.
Yeah, I'm keen to understand from you, Bryn, when we look at the number 10s at the moment, and obviously we're seeing the Chiefs unbeaten, we're seeing Damian McKenzie looking really, really strong, and we're seeing probably Richie and Beauden not quite at 100%. Is there a definite possibility that we could see D-Mac jump both of them and be the starting 10 at the World Cup, or do you feel like it's unlikely?
Well, I think that's pretty tough. I think, they're pretty low in and around, having the two 10s. And I think Damian coming back, and which is fair enough. I think he's the form 10 and he's probably shown the best consistency with the Chiefs. And he's probably one of the reasons why they've gone undefeated. But I think, look, you've got two quality 10s that probably, probably aren't where they want to be. But, it's a long competition. You've got to look at around the longevity of what it's going to look like in the finals. And even that's where we want them peaking. And so I guess for Damian, it's been ready to be able to get himself in that conversation to be able to start at 10, possibly like you're saying, Ross, or getting in the conversation to be that third 10, because I think the 10 role has to be able to cover 15, and all Damian can do is consistently play well at 10, and when he does get put to 15, when Bryn or Joshua come on, and be able to stake his claim that way. But I believe Jip. I think Richie and Brodie will come good, but then I think the more that Damian can play well, if there are injuries, we have seen in previous World Cups, Stephen Doddle not too long ago, that you are going to need that depth if there are injuries. And, Damian's playing at a great level at the moment, so hopefully continue that for the rest of the year.
The one thing I love about big time players like Beauden Barrett and Richie Mo'unga, and I suppose if we use Carter and McCaw leading into the 2015 World Cup, is when the pressure goes on these individuals, they front up and they will 9 times out of 10 bring their very best out of themselves. So I'm excited to starting to see that transition into their world-class stuff, because they won't be going away without a fight.
Damian McKenzie, I suppose, as an option on the bench is a very, very strong one, whether it's at 23 or 22. How do you feel they might use him?
I think he's probably gunning for 22
and
being that genuine 10-15. But, in terms of his versatility, he can play wing. He could definitely be a right winger. I don't think there's a hell of a lot of difference between 15 and that right wing spot. He's got enough pace. He's got great aerial skills. So he fits into both. It'll just be, maybe they want that 23 spot to cover a midfield. You do need that midfield cover. But then, if there's a Leicester starting, it really depends on who else is in form and what way they're going to go to see that balance, because we could come up with a number of different versions depending on who actually starts the game and how they need cover, what cover they need.
Bryn, you wouldn't think you necessarily need that much wing cover when you've got Rico at 13 and also, chances are you can have Geordie at 12, and both of them have been successful wingers at international level.
Yeah, it is, and I think it all depends around what they do with Beauden as well. Do they want to play him out as an out-and-out 10, or having him at that fullback role? If he's at fullback, then there's probably no need to have Damian in that 10-15 cover with Brodie being able to cover 10. But again, I just think there's so many ways of that 23 role, how they're going to do it. If Beauden isn't selected, then he's got on the bench. Then is it a conversation between Damian and Beauden Barrett, because they both cover that 10-15 role on the bench. So there is a lot of flexibility around that. But I think it just all depends where they see that mix. Do they see Beauden as a 15 or just an out-and-out 10 going with Richie? Probably then opening up for Damian to have that kind of 10 and 15 role cover if that's selection.
Sam Cane. Now, apart from taking a shot to the goalies, he had
it looked painful, though,
didn't look nice.
Oh.
He had a big game in that game.
Yeah, he's had a big season. Statistically, he's always in the top one or two defensively. He's getting good reward at the breakdown. It's not always leading to turnovers or penalties, but it is. We've spoken about, because he's so hard to move, you always have to commit 2 or 3 bodies to get rid of him, which obviously shortens the attacking structures of the opposition. He still gets through his work and the tough carries and his breakdown. He's super quick in terms of winning that race for their attacking ball and winning that collision and breakdown. So he's going really well. Not saying a hell of a lot, and he just almost looks like he's lined up this season. He just wants to make statements with his actions.
as a leader, we heard Brad Weber say afterwards what that kind of approach means to the rest of his team, Bryn. It's a hell of a statement to make.
Oh, it is. And look, that's his kind of style, isn't it? I think you've seen around, I guess, the things that I've alluded to around the physicality of the breakdown in the Northern Hemisphere. I think he's been able to show a real direction of where we probably need our loose forwards to be able to come that time of year, because he's first or second to those rucks, and his efficiency at the ruck at the moment, ruck time, both defensively and on attack, has been really good. So hopefully the Goalies aren't too pumped up and too sore, and hopefully we can see him moving forward, because he's been in great form, and probably there's been a lot of hype around Dalton, which is fair enough, probably the last year, but he started his campaign very well with that number 7 jersey, and hopefully come in with the All Blacks.
His mate Brodie Retallick's hitting red hot form too. He's a big part of laying this platform to allow McKenzie and co and Sean Stevenson to do their thing. Like, some of his numbers of the amount of work he gets through is back to the good old days when he was sort of paving the way of the start of his international career, which I think's exciting, because everyone was sort of hard on him last season, ever since he's come back from Japan. But he's another one that's making a huge statement, and it's exciting for where that All Black squad can be when he's performing like that. And obviously Sam Whitelock out with his thumb, but we know those two together are very successful in terms of the win-loss column in the black jersey.
What numbers are you looking to from Brodie when you're seeing him play?
It's his breakdowns. Like, the amount of breakdowns he hits is just, if you look at another lock, say that that lock hits 18 or 19, which is still a good amount of attacking breakdowns, he's in the 30s. 32, 33 times he is in the first 3 from the Chiefs clearing that breakdown. And what I like about it is, he still has relatively high carries, so he plays roles elsewhere, but it's his selfless nature and the way, if you watch him work off the ball, sometimes he's passing teammates to clean another breakdown. So it's all those sort of unseen efforts that the coaches will pick up, and makes him why everyone in the team loves him, is because he does things that probably don't get celebrated in terms of publicity, because you have to watch it and you have to know what you're looking at to see it. But he sort of changed the game in that locking sense with the Chiefs. I think when they won it back-to-back 12-13, and from there it was almost like an expectation of type 5 players to reach his levels of those attacking breakdowns. And he's second to none defensive breakdowns as well. He gets a number of turnovers, and for a big man, it's actually really hard to get that low and not be able to get blown out, because you've got so much of a target area to get rid of. But he's so strong, and he's got that size back. He's sort of an immovable object.
He's obviously got a fairly solid technique then.
Yeah, he does, but he's just it's a solid technique, but it's also, he doesn't muck around trying to just win the penalty. He tries to get the ball up and going, and I think once refs see that, he normally ends up with a penalty, or he gets the ball.
But I suppose the hard part about that is accuracy, right? Like, you can hit a million breakdowns, but you don't really see Brodie Retallick get penalised hitting breakdowns that often. You get him penalised for other things, but not necessarily for his breakdown hits.
No, Brodie Retallick gets your shoulder in there. He makes sure when he's got your hands on you, he doesn't let you go, and it's usually puts your head in the ground, which is pretty not nice for a halfback. But look, he does it very, very well. And I guess it adds to the kind of niggliness when you do play Brodie Retallick. You're like, geez, I've got to be on the job here, or else it's either going to be a bit sore, or you're not going to be able to get to the ball quick enough as a halfback. So, he's a great player, and he's playing really well for the Chiefs at the moment, obviously.
You mentioned Taukei'aho. I thought he needed to pin his ears back for the corner for that try. I thought he was there.
He was, and then he just slipped. It was. Yeah. I thought he was there, and I don't think it would have been an easy stop, even if a Blues defender did get across, because he was fair humming.
You got the feeling that he's obviously got a huge amount of confidence when he runs directly at a bloke in the line. Yeah, but suddenly he's in the open. He's like, oh, what am I doing here? Like,
he did hit the afterburners though. He got away.
As a covering tackler, you're just licking your lips that he's just fell over. You're just like, thank God.
You what?
But then just off there, the hell of a finish from Aotearoa though. Man, he's in some great form. He played tremendously well, obviously with a lot of wingers playing very well in that in the competition. So he's continuing his form, maybe at a All Black jersey and Rugby Championship and World Cup possibly.
Yeah, totally. Goldie was talking about, the amount of limbs that he had to control as he was diving into the corner. I think did he catch the ball midair and put the ball down midair? Like, what an incredible thing to do while two defenders are on you.
Two big defenders, like one was Caleb Clark trying to like get you out the sideline. So it was amazing, but I think he's just simplified his game, and he probably wasn't even worried about them. He just knew he had to take care of himself, and that's exactly what he did. But I thought, when I first thought, you're going to do well not to be out here. And no, it was a hell of a start.
When they got rid of Lowe, I was wondering what they were doing on the right wing of the Chiefs, because he had been relatively impressive, you know, but obviously they knew what they were doing.
Clearly. But I mean, you got to remember, Amoni was with the Blues for 3 or 4 seasons, so he's had a lot of time in a professional environment, and I think you're starting to see, and that Bay of Plenty side's gone really well. He's moved there in the NPC, and you're just starting to see that experience pay off. But also, I think having his baby girl, he's mentioned a number of times, has made him mature a hell of a lot and changed his lifestyle. So it's even, you know, aspects of that, where what's happening away from rugby is you know, sort of sharpening his focus with his rugby as well.
It's an interesting conversation that obviously you come through academies and you come through schools and you have, you know, nutritionists and you have training and everything is laid out in front of you. To a degree, as a rugby player, it's almost what comes on outside of life that you have to rely on to mature you, because everything is set in stone everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, to a point, like, there's obviously, you do want to try and avoid that learned helplessness, but the reality is, you're right, like, sometimes you just need to know the shed, you need to know what you're doing to get the very best out of you on the rugby field. But I totally agree. I think what you do away from the field is massive in your development as a person, but also as a rugby player.
Learned helplessness.
Learned helplessness.
Go on.
Well, you know what it's
Yeah.
like. It's if you constantly get given a schedule and told where to be, what to wear, you almost, then you come out the other side of your career, and then you don't have that. It's like you're setting people up to fail. So it's about trying to make sure that the environments, although they have to deliver, you know, in terms of a slick system, it's not all just spoon-fed.
Yeah.
You know, make the players part of the conversation, make them part of organising it, and you know what they want to do, little committees here and there, so that it's actually player-driven, not just staff-driven.
I think as young players coming through, you know, you probably go from the schooling system and being able to be the big fish in a small pond, and that's the kind of situation you've been in for, you know, for a lot of these young kids coming through the system. Sorry, not to say that Moni's doing that, but sometimes it just takes that ability to be able to be in a system for 3 to 4 years, learning the preparation side, the outside, like Jip, you were alluding to, and being able to then go from there and then get the confidence to then understand what you are as a rugby player. Like Sean Stevenson talked about it probably last year, around, it took him a while to understand around what it was for him to be a rugby player and what makes him click to get the best out of him. And he's been here for 5 or 6 years before he actually figured that out. So sometimes players get it really, really quickly and are able to really adjust and being able to hit the ground running. But sometimes it takes a little bit longer to firstly maybe get an opportunity and then being able to play consistently and then being able to get your preparation or your outside rugby, getting that right and all that marrying up together. And then you're probably seeing how Amoni's going at the moment and playing really, really consistent. That probably just shows around some of those areas that they were touched on.
I remember talking to TJ Pettinato a couple of years ago about an injury that he had, and he talked about how he came out of the back of that injury and he had to think about what his identity was, because he had seen himself as a rugby player and only in a rugby player. And when he was out for that long, he had to see himself as something else. And then when he got back to rugby, he felt like he was a much more rounded rugby player because of the ability to see the rest of the world and not just that thing that was the goal from when he was this high.
Yeah, and I think as you get in sort of the latter parts of your career, when you have big injuries like that, it's when something as precious as living your dream gets taken away from you, you actually come back a better player, because you don't take any day for granted, you don't take any training for granted, you don't take any game for granted, and it brings a better edge out of you as a player. But I also think it's massive in terms of that growth of you as an individual and making sure that you are more than just a rugby player, because every individual is.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Brad Weber maybe, because Brad has put up a Give a Little page. He's more than just a rugby player. He's trying to help out the people of Hawke's Bay, obviously a very dear province to his heart. Through the flooding and the cyclone that happened over the last couple of months, he set up this Give a Little page because he's worried that not enough is still going back and that maybe people will forget that there's still work needed and still help needed. So look at the bottom of the screen, they'll give a little pages there. All proceeds will go to the Hawke's Bay Foundation's Cyclone Relief Fund. So please, if you can, help them out, help the region, which is struggling so badly after the cyclone. So well done, Brad. Thank you very much for doing that and for looking after the people in your region. So yes, moving on from that, speaking of regions, the Blues, you know, there's going to be a lot of chat about Leon McDonald next year, about whether he is with Scott Robertson within the All Blacks setup. And there are now rumours going around about who's going to replace him. Those rumours include Dave Rennie. There was an article by Liam Napier where he said that there's been an approach. Is he a good fit?
Well, I'm obviously part of his coaching staff, so, you know, we've got that good connection there, heading back into the Blues. Look, I think he's a great fit anywhere. I think I am yet to hear a player talk, you know, poorly about Dave Rennie. And even a lot of those senior Wallaby leaders, you know, have a lot of respect, and they say a lot of, you know, I suppose glowing reports in terms of him as who he is as a person, but also the environments he creates. Probably the only one blemish with Vunivalu, I think, around training schedules and so forth, but I don't think that falls at the feet of just the head coach. So, look, it would be great. I'd be extremely excited as an ex-Blues player, but someone that really wants to see the Blues go well, and someone of his calibre going in there. He knows how to win Super Rugby titles, which is what everyone's trying to do in that building.
Obviously, Tom Coventry's a guy who's got a solid relationship too. Well, and prior history. So, I think it would be exciting, but with all these rumours, I mean, it's never guaranteed. Sometimes when there's smoke, there is fire. Do you see the smoke, Bryn?
I do see the smoke, but I think I've also heard that he might be coming over to Japan possibly as well. So, there's obviously a lot of rumours. And when there's a guy like that has that much experience, we've talked a lot around how great of a coach he is. And I think for him being at the Blues environment, I think Tom Coventry's there. He'd be great for the environment. But then in saying that as well, like you look at, I'm not too sure what Joe Smith's doing, Jip. I know that he's spent a bit of time with the Blues, and I think if Leon did go and Joe Smith didn't go into that All Blacks camp, then you'd have to think that he'd be a good candidate to be able to jump and slip in right there with the coaching staff that's there. But look, Dave Rennie's probably going to have a lot of opportunities, whether that's in Japan, different parts of Europe, or coming back home to New Zealand. I think anywhere that he does go, they're going to get a great candidate and a great coach moving forward. Yeah,
and I think you'd be silly not to have conversations with those people. But knowing Joe Schmidt, I suppose he's going to be all out focused on the preparations towards the World Cup, and then would probably look at having those discussions post that. Whether that's soon enough for Blues management, I'm not too sure. So you definitely hope he's been factored in somewhere, but I suppose he has sort of alluded to that maybe a head role like that isn't what he's after.
He has been within the Blues camp in the last couple of years. He has a solid understanding, but...
Oh, massive, and a hell of a lot of respect from the playing group and other coaches.
When he came back to New Zealand, he wasn't sounding like head coaching was necessarily something that was on his radar at all, was it?
No, but then, you know, I don't know if the All Blacks role was either, so, you know, time does change things.
Yeah.
Another guy that would be worthy of a conversation, that's for sure.
And what we do know is that Jip is going to want to be on that. He tried to get on the Wallabies team. The phone call didn't come.
It didn't come, and it's still not coming, I don't think, but
yeah,
I'll still be a fan of Dave Rennie.
And what role exactly are you after?
I'm not too sure. I don't think I'm a very good coach, so I'll put the cones out or something.
Yeah. Oh, you can be their official podcaster.
Yeah.
So let's move on. Let's talk about another front rower. The Landers versus Moana Pacifica. Obviously, the Landers got up 45-17 in that game away from home. Ethan de Groot, that guy is in a battle, obviously, with Joe Moody, who had been out for injured for a long time for that Loosehead spot. It feels to me like he might have it.
Oh, I think he finished the year as the incumbent. So, you know, normally in All Blacks sides of the past is, you know, him and Tyrell Lomax and Samasoni will probably get first rights, and then it's how long you can hold your form and not give you know, a teammate a crack in the jersey that you want to be in. But make no bones about it, Joe Moody's performing pretty well himself as an individual. The stats were pretty similar, you know, around the park. So I think that'll be the one that probably differentiates how they go, and keeping that edge on both of them is a good thing for us, because both of them play. I think Joe played 55 minutes on the weekend, Ethan 61 minutes. So that's the reality of Test match footy might even be less. So either way, I think both of them are going really well, and you'll see both of them get opportunity. But I think you'd say Ethan's probably will get first look at it, especially if he keeps going with the form he's got at the moment with the Highlanders.
For a long time, Joe had a good stranglehold in that jersey, and probably just has had a few injuries here and there, and not been able to have a longevity of 4 or 5 years without injuries. But I think just knowing him personally, I think it's probably lit a fire underneath him, knowing that Ethan de Groot and the propping, how the props went with Tyrone Lomax and Fletcher Newell going well at the end of the year was really probably motivating for him, and not being able to be a part of that. And so the good thing about Joe that I've seen is actually evolved his game a little bit. We know how good he is around the scrummaging and the line-out work, but I think his little touches that he has with his ball carrying and even his efficiency at the breakdown has got a lot better. And I've even seen a few defensive turnovers, which we always joke about him not being able to get turnovers, but he's shown a bit of growth in that area. So sometimes, you see someone in New Jersey and it adds a bit of fight, and you've definitely seen that with Ethan de Groot and how he's played. And I agree with Jip. You'd have to think that Ethan would get the first lick, and then Joe will get his opportunity. And then from there, you just go with the form, and whoever's playing more consistently will get that starting role at the World Cup. He's probably struggles to stay injury-free, but fingers crossed for the All Blacks and the Crusaders, especially the Crusaders, actually, with the injuries that they have. Can't really afford to have any more going down with George Bauer possibly injured as well.
That's for sure. Let's touch on that, Bryn, because I'm really interested in that. When you look at the injury toll and you look at the young guys coming into this Crusaders team and the fact that they've got another win, what is it that prepares these young guys to come into this Crusaders outfit and provide what is needed straight away? How does this particular franchise prepare players to come essentially straight out of NPC and into performing like a Super Rugby player?
Yeah, well, I think the academy system, they do a really good job down there. Now, Webby has been running that for the last decade, and I think the percentage of being able to have professional rugby players through that academy system is around 80%. That's a pretty phenomenal percentage when it's coming to professional rugby in New Zealand. But I think what they do really well is that whether you've just finished school, they'll bring you down there, and then they'll get you in the academy system, which is pretty much a blueprint of what it is to be a Super Rugby player. And I'm not too sure what other academies are like around the country, but I know they do it really well down there. They're integrated into the Super Rugby pretty early on, and the Mitre 10 Cup systems, whether that be with the coaches, players coming into Super Rugby environments for weeks within the year to be able to, I guess, ingrain to them what it is to be a professional rugby player and playing for the Crusaders. And so when they finally do get in there, even when they are young and they haven't played, they've got a pretty good idea around what your week structure is going to look like, what's going to be acceptable around what you're needed as a player. And then when they do come in, they've had about, you'd have to say 12 to 24 months, been in the environment, learning from players, doing all the preparation, everything you need to be a Super Rugby player. So when they do finally play, look at a guy like Jamie Hanna, who's been in the environment for the last 2 years when I was there through the academy system. It's seamless for them because they're doing the same structures, they're doing the same terminology, the same messaging that's coming from the academy system. So they do it really well down there. And like you said, Ross, they just seem to go in there, and it doesn't seem like it's too much of an occasion because they just get prepped really well from a young age as soon as they finish school. And then I guess the coaching and the leadership and even the players as well, it's a pretty driven group to help them out to then succeed when they are on the field.
And do they pick players who they know will fit into the system, or do they pick players and train them to fit into the system?
Oh, I think they have a pretty good idea, like, I guess, as their, how do you say it? Their ideal Crusader player, where it comes to their virtues and what they're looking for. So, some regions they have a different criteria what they look for, but they do have a certain criteria that they do look for to be able to then be selected. Now, look, you might get a little bit of a raw person that is a little bit raw, and you might be able to then bring him in to then try and build him into the culture and change his ways. But very rarely does that happen. They've got a pretty good idea around the player that they want, and then you might bring up 3 or 4 that are a little bit left field, and then being able to try and mould them in and hoping that they can mould them into the players to then succeed at Super Rugby and Mitre 10 Cup level. What
things in particular? What are the pillars?
Oh, I think it's just it's pretty self-explanatory. Hard work is pretty important down there. And then obviously being selfless, and then ability to compete as well. And I think when you've got those kind of those pillars, and there are a few more, but I guess those are the big ones. And then probably just lastly, having a good character. You've got to be a good bugger. I think they do very well in being able to select guys that have great character and great IQ, and I guess that gives you the best start to be able to, I guess, trained really well for an academy for a long period of time, because sometimes it doesn't just take 6 months. It might take 2 years of resilience of being able to not get opportunities. But when you've got great character and those kind of pillars, good things tend to happen after that.
Is that what you see from a distance?
We talk about the Crusaders winning games from where they shouldn't, and it's all just through grit, determination, and I think we all know that if you get that in a group, but I think probably the environment doesn't accept not doing that, and you'll be found out very quickly. So they constantly have a really good, I suppose, sort of conveyor belt of talent slipping in with the same sort of characteristics and understanding that they've seen from the leaders gone before, and they know that they don't want to let that down for them leading the next generation and so forth.
Before we let Bryn go, because he's got to head off to training, let's just do the tipping before we let Bryn go, and then we can jump onto some of the other games and some of the other questions that we've had come through from the people. Crusaders versus Moana Pacifica, Bryn.
It's going to be a tough one for the old Moana Pacifica, so yeah, Crusaders, 13+.
Yeah, look, I think the Crusaders, but again, statistically, with ball in hand, Moana Pacifica are showing a lot of excitement, and it's the defence. They tackled at 90%. So even though the Highlanders scored all those points, it's what they need to sort out is when attacking sides get in behind their defensive line, and we saw the offload game from the Highlanders or the pop up, not having to clean the rucks. They just can't. They can't survive from that because they can't get set and they can't get off their line. So they need to make sure they're probably getting two in the tackle, trying to wrap that ball up, slow that breakdown down on defence, because they're making their tackles, they're just not doing it together. But I think going down there will be a step too far. But I just like to put it out there because it's easy to just go, oh, they're struggling. But statistically, when you look at them, they're not. It's just they're taking such big hits late in the game.
Cool. Reds, Brumbies.
Brumbies.
Brumbies?
Brumbies.
Brumbies, not Reds. Okay. Highlanders, Canes, Bryn?
Oh, I'll go the Canes, but man, the Highlanders honestly have got a lot better the last 3 weeks, and you probably touch on a little bit more, but the execution around their 22-metre zone and their high face count and patience has been a real improvement. But I'll go the Hurricanes, but the Highlanders have shown a lot of improvement. Yeah,
totally agree, but I just think the Canes they're too strong.
Okay. Rebels versus the Blues. Blues away from home.
Blues.
Blues.
You head off to training. We don't want to get you in trouble with the coach.
Thanks, boys. Arigato gozaimasu.
Okay, see you soon. I thought the match of the round in a lot of ways was the Brumbies Tars.
Oh, yeah.
That was a great game. It was a great watch. The Brumbies are second. The Tars are 11th. But really, there wasn't much in between them, and the Tars copped 3 cards.
Yeah, and that's probably the space where they'll look back and they did actually score a try when there were the 2 cards, but I think it just sucked too much out of the tank, and you could just see the Brumbies were coming home strong. But you'd have to like from an attacking, if you just look at it from an attacking point of view, what the Waratahs showed just from strike attack, their ability to keep the ball alive from deep, it should excite them and they should have won that game. Like there's no doubt about it, especially even when they got ahead 36-35. If Donaldson doesn't kick that out on the full, the Brumbies don't get that chance to enter into the 22 and score that match winner. So I think there's a lot to like in it. It's probably the performance we've expected from the Tars from the get-go.
But they still didn't get the win, and now they're in a really tough bind at an 11th place.
Yeah,
it's a big hole to dig yourself out of.
It is, but that performance away from home against the top Aussie side has got to give them confidence to go on a little bit of a run here. And we look at the Highlanders, for example. They were right down the bottom early doors, and they're fighting their way back into 6th at the moment. So I think, again, with 8 teams going to the final, there's still a chance.
The Hurricanes against the Force. No, the Hurricanes never looked like they were going to lose, but boy, they can be a little bit sharper.
Yeah, I think it's just been their Achilles heel, their willingness to attack. Like they nearly ran for 700 run metres. So they were certainly out to attack. That's the game plan they wanted to go with, and it worked really well, especially in the first 30 minutes. But again, 18 turnovers, in terms of handling errors, is just probably too high for when you're playing sides like the Crusaders, the Blues, or the Chiefs. So I think that'll be their one focus, because man, when they string it together, and a guy that I do want to single out because he hasn't had a hell of a lot of opportunity is Duplessis Kirifi. 14 carries, 14 tackles, 4 breakdown turnovers. He was everywhere. So he put his hand up. You know, he hasn't been. You know, I think Devin Flanders has played there. You know, obviously Artie's been in there or thereabouts. You'll see. So that loose forward mix is really hard to break into. But he had some sort of performance. So it was good to see him after such a strong campaign with Wellington as the skipper, winning the Shield and the title. It was good to see him go well. But I think Jason Holland will be looking their attacking structures and maybe just making sure they don't chance their arm too much. And it's a crucial offload here or there that leads to an error that doesn't allow them to score points.
They've got a week off with the bye, like the Chiefs have a week off with the bye. What will they be looking to do during that week? I suppose the players go away, but do the coaches continue to look into what needs to be done?
Oh no, I think you've got to take those mental windows
Yeah.
to really take 4 or 5 days away and come back fresh with an edge, because these aren't system things. It's just execution, because they have an all-out attack mindset. So you're going to probably have a higher turnover rate than normal, but a couple of times it has cost them, and it's allowed sides to come back into the game late in the piece. They haven't lost games, so it's not the be-all. I just think when it comes to the latter part, they'd probably want that around 10 to 12, because you've got to understand the way they play, they will have a few. But when it gets to 18-20, we've seen sort of impact in the latter parts of the game when they're fatiguing.
It's a light weekend. 4 games.
Yeah.
4 games. I mean, we're coming off watching all of the Six Nations, all of Aotearoa, and then 6 games of Super Rugby each weekend. What are you going to do with yourself?
Oh, the Masters is on.
Oh, well, that's true. Ryan Fox is on.
Yeah. Can't miss the Masters. Masters weekend on Easter weekend too, so you actually get to see it all 4 days, so I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, if New Zealand watch it on Sky. Ryan Fox, of course, we've got coverage, but we'll be getting content from Ryan Fox every day coming into our social servers and filling up our stations, so keep an eye out. You know, Ryan is due for something big. He's a good bugger and he's a good player.
Well, if you saw anything, he played a par 4 the other day at a tournament into the breeze and landed it on the green. And he had to go over the water. It was a very ambitious shot, and may I say, pretty impressive. So I'm excited to see him rip into it this weekend.
He rips it like John Daly. Like, you can see his whole body just go.
It's
amazing.
It's a thing I wish I could do. But
Yeah.
I'm absolutely terrible for tea. So
Yeah.
scramble it is.
Totally. Welcome to the Aotearoa Golf Podcast. We'll be bringing you this kind of information.
Brought to you by
every
TaylorMade.
week. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me if you turned up with
On
a
the other
TaylorMade
side.
T-shirt on, to be fair. Now, we're always asking you for your feedback, and we've been getting plenty of it in the YouTube comments. Also via email, we've been getting plenty of feedback for you. Sorry to a couple of you, they ended up in my spam and I missed it. So I dug into the spam this week and found some questions from you. So one of those questions was from Gary Kingy. He said, why can't the 3 competitions, speaking about under-20s, Aotearoa and Pacific, be played on the same day, create a great spectacle where you watch all 3 games at the same time and allow us to see what's coming and allow people to, I suppose, become part of the club?
Yep, great idea, but I suppose the logistics of it, you know, the under-20s program, you've got to limit as much time. You know, they've obviously got lives outside of rugby, they're not professionals. So, you know, if having that week aside and they know when it is and they can structure their lives around it, I think is quite critical for them. And because not every player that goes to that under-20s or makes the under-20s is going to be a professional player, so they do need to be more probably focused in other areas. But, you know, I think we've seen a number of double headers with Aotearoa and Super Rugby Pacific, and I think we will see more of that, you know, when I suppose both sides of the Tasman come together in a competition similar to Super Rugby Pacific. So I think it'll become more and more prevalent as more games become available.
I suppose logistically the hard part as far as Aotearoa is concerned is that basically there aren't as many teams.
No.
And that's one thing they'd have to overcome to allow this to be a week in, week out tournament like that.
100%. And, you know, if you want to have double headers, you need a Brumbies side, you need a Tars side with the Blues and so forth. So it's not to say it's not doable in time, but as there's more depth of players, you can get more teams and hopefully in the future. And maybe under-20s does become a little bit more professional and allows them to do that. Because I think, the league do it really well.
Yeah.
They play, I think, 4 games, the under-20s and the feeder side, and then the W, and then the main game as well. So I think, there are examples of it being done well, but it's a little bit more professional in terms of the remuneration those players get at that under-20 level.
Yeah, and money is a huge factor in this. Maybe the Silver Lake money needs to be thrown at some stuff like this. I don't know.
I'm not even going to reopen that can of worms.
The Silver Lake money's got to go somewhere. This could be an opportunity. Now, the other question that we had that was actually made me laugh from TCR in our YouTube comments. Can I get some praise for a Cam Roigard from the boys? Now, TCR, thank you for asking that question. Chip, you love to praise Cam Roigard.
Oh,
the floor is yours.
I do not know how you have not picked up I am captain of this man's fan club. What can I say? He's got great vision. He's got the ability to play at pace. He's got the ability to be physical, sort of similar to Flau Whakatava. And the way he's performing at the moment, the relationship he's got with Brett Cameron, second to none. But it's his energy and his desire to want to play the big play that I really like. And 9 times out of 10 it comes off. Which makes it even more infectious. But he changes the game, especially at NPC level, you've seen it. And I think at times with the Hurricanes, he's going to do it more and more. But you watch, when his team's under pressure, he'll look to go for a quick tap and catch the opposition off guard, or, do a quick throw in, or, sort of work a little bit harder to get into a position to, make a big impact on a game. And he does it time and time again. So it's extremely exciting to see him doing that now at the higher level. And I think we all know that he will wear black one day, whether it's this year or next. Not sure.
Well, we saw Flau Whakatava, looking good.
Yeah,
and I would presume that if he was going to knock someone out of All Black reckoning, it would have to be Flau Whakatava.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's even his teammate TJ Perenara as well. So that in terms of that balance of the halfbacks, I think they will go for. You've got your Finlays, your Aarons and your Brads, and how do they fit into 2, or they just go, that's what we're going for, or you want those 2 that play that game they like to see, and then having one with that sort of physical presence and ability to do something different.
Mm-hmm. Halfbacks is an interesting talking point of this new Wallabies camp.
Yeah, pretty brutal, Eddie.
Yeah.
I think he's been pretty straight up though. Like, if the form's not there, he's not going to pick you, and he wants to pick on form. But also, this is just a camp, so sometimes some players just need a little bit of that sort of anxiety or something that they may be falling out of the reckoning to bring the very best out of them. And I think it's very hard to play well at halfback if your pack's not dominating. And I think if you use the Brumbies as an example, both their halfbacks have got in off the back of their pack, dominating physically. I think the Waratahs will get there, as will, I think, it was the first, probably, even though they didn't get the points, Queensland Red side was probably the best they've been in a long time against the Crusaders in terms of that first 30 minutes. So there's still time, but it'll probably be the making of them, and Eddie will learn a lot about the individuals.
Eddie being Eddie, you wonder whether there's a chance he's just sending a message to Tate McDermott and Jake Gordon. Like, is he just saying to them, hey guys, we know you're good. I'm not going to let you in here. This is my message to you. Lift your game.
Well, that's the only message it can be, is they're not at the levels he wants. I think it's a little hard on Jake. Like, Tate probably a little bit more so hasn't had the vintage year that we're used to seeing him, but he's still pretty young, so he'll come out the other side of this. But man, Jake Gordon does some pretty big plays to keep the Waratahs in games. There's little intercepts, there's little extra efforts defensively. So maybe that's just because I like that sort of stuff that I warm to him. But he's another one that's also a really good leader. So having played him and knowing the guy as an individual, he's not going to shy away from this. Similar to like a Nick Phibbs, another New South Welshman. They'll fight. They'll certainly fight.
Yeah, sometimes he picks up that team on his back.
I know. Yeah, more often than not.
Yeah.
And he always does it, with not a smile on his face, but he holds his head high and he looks at the I suppose the positives rather than getting down on the negatives.
The other aspect of the playmaking over there is Noah Lolosio is not in that squad. He's been in and out. They haven't shown a lot of faith. He's been inconsistent, and Carter Gordon is there. Is this the death knell maybe for his World Cup chances?
No, I don't think so, because I think the Brumbies will run deep. So you'll get to see them in those pressure situations, and you win a Super Rugby title, it will be hard to ignore you. Quade Cooper is someone that I think is attending the camp via Zoom or whatever in a couple of sessions, so he's still in the mix. Donaldson, by the sounds, Eddie's taken a liking to him from the Northern Tour, so when he was obviously the English coach. So he's seen something there he likes, and then the young fella Connors from the Rebels is just playing really well as an individual. So Eddie's probably trying to stick to his words and say, I'm going to reward for him.
Now, there's a lot of water to go under the bridge, obviously, before the World Cup. But when you look at this squad, is this a squad that could win the Rugby Championship, the Shortened Rugby Championship? Is it a squad that looks like it's got what it takes to go deep into this World Cup?
I think it's a squad that at the current moment is trying to light flames in people, some with rewarding them with their first time at a camp, and others just a little bop on the nose to say, make sure you're being sharp. So I think it's going to give Eddie a deeper squad and a harder job to pick that World Cup squad, because there'll be a lot of guys that haven't got comfortable. I don't think he makes environments. I think he's a great coach in terms of the way he's adapted, and I'm not saying, because sometimes he gets a bit of a hard time for, sort of he can only last a certain amount of time in teams, but he does have the ability to make you sort of feel uncomfortable as a player, which I think is a good place to be. You never want I think the moment, or if we use golf as an example, the moment you think you've nailed golf is the moment that it'll pull you back down to earth. So it's a little bit similar to that. I think he creates that edge in his environments that you always have to be on, always performing.
It always takes you back to Steve Hansen, You only get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, it does work. It is proven to bring the best out of individuals.
Yeah, so did I get an answer from that?
I don't know.
Deep to the World Cup?
I don't know, but when I look at it at the moment, I don't think so, because there's so many unproven test players.
Yeah.
But I'm keeping my powder dry, because there are guys playing well in Super Rugby, and what I'm saying is he's going to bring a bigger squad of options to himself too. And then you've got to back him as a coach. He does have success. He does have success. But looking at that and some of the form of the players, probably not at this stage.
Yeah. Well, we did see Checker in a year take a team to a World Cup final, so it's not unprecedented.
No, and I don't think my judgment's not coming on the fact that Eddie's come in late. It's just more he's trying to get his feel on the side and making sure that his message is being heard loud and clear. I'm sure they are.
There is nothing, absolutely nothing quiet about Eddie Jones. No. Well, thank you very much once again for joining us on the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. We'll catch you again next week. We've got plenty to watch this weekend, if not as much as usual. Crusaders versus Moana Pacifica, Reds v Brumbies, Highlanders v Canes, Rebels v Blues. Catch all of that action on Sky Sport. You can catch all of the analysis on Sky and also on RugbyPass if you want to get a hold of us. This is our email address, aotearoarugbypod@sky.co.nz. Also, if you want to come into the tipping league, go to Super Rugby Tipping, go to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod League, join us and see if you can knock us off our purchase. My purchase is very low.
I took a hit this week.
But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Chip, once again. We'll see you all next week with James Parsons, Bryn Hall and Ross Karl.